Good morning and welcome to today's Mark Samuelian Distinguished Speaker Series conversation with Ukrainian Ambassador Oksana Markarova on Russia's attack on Ukraine and the future of U.S.-Ukraine relations. My name is Patrick Mishevich, board member of the World Affairs Council of Miami. I am an independent, non-partisan, 501c3 nonprofit working on enhancing local access to high-quality information on international affairs. Recently, we launched our Central and Eastern European program, where I serve as a program chair. Our focus is to present high-quality information on the region through engagement with diplomatic, political, business, and think tank leaders in the context of ongoing war in Ukraine. We are honored to host Ambassador Markarova today. We do so in commitment to the promise made by the Central Eastern Europe program to keep Miami attentive, informed, and engaged with the critical issues facing this region. As we approach the second anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, we're reminded of the continued defiance of everyday Ukrainians who are paying the ultimate sacrifice in defense of their homeland. We are also reminded of our responsibility here at home to maintain our community's awareness of this war progress, of our country's connection to it, and of what is Ukraine is fighting for. In light of those reflections, it is imperative to consider the strategic dimensions of this war. Failure by the world to address this conflict in its current state will very well lead to its violent and regrettable expansion. This is why the West has, since Russia's February 2022 invasion, bolstered Ukraine's military industrial capacity so it may better defend itself. As we see and hear in the news, and witness with the latest reports regarding fall of Avdiivka, Ukraine's leadership says that existing support is insufficient. More is needed to match Russia's staggering personal and industrial capabilities. Given current deficiencies in European military stockpiles that will take years to resolve, much of the responsibility will therefore continue to fall to the United States. With that responsibility in mind, I express our appreciation to our partners from across the country for joining us today and making this event a nationwide conversation. Thank you to the World Affairs Councils of Atlanta, Cleveland, Tennessee, and Orange County, California. Our sincere gratitude as well to the Embassy of Ukraine in the United States for the confidence and support on this program. Our goal today is that those tuning in, having heard from Ambassador Markarova on the war status and the state of U.S.-Ukraine relations, leads this conversation better informed as individuals, more engaged as citizens, and empowered against the rampant misinformation that surrounds this critical issue. Today's conversation will be moderated by Aaron Rosen, President of World Affairs Council of Miami. We hope and expect you have many questions, and kindly ask you to share them in the Q&A sessions at the end of the event. Before we begin, we hear from President of World Affairs Council of Atlanta, Ricky Bevington, who will share why her council was motivated to put together this event. Ricky will also formally introduce the ambassador. Ricky, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Patrick. Thank you to Aaron, the World Affairs Council of Miami, the Embassy of Ukraine, and our partner councils around the country. I am proud to represent the World Affairs Council of Atlanta, as well as Metro Atlanta and the Southeast broadly, where the war in Ukraine has been of utmost interest since the Russian invasion in February of 2022. It is the mission of the World Affairs Council of Atlanta to be a forum for informed discussion of global affairs that impact Metro Atlanta's economy, culture, and quality of life. And war absolutely does that for all of us, no matter where it is, especially a land war in Europe, the first since World War II. So it's very important for the World Affairs Council of Atlanta, our members and supporters, to participate in this type of conversation, and we're honored to be here today. Thank you. It is my pleasure and honor to introduce Oksana Markarova, who has served as Ukraine's ambassador to the U.S. since April 2021 Since July of 2023, she also serves as ambassador of Ukraine to Antigua and Barbuda. Ambassador Markarova previously served in Ukraine's Ministry of Finance from 2015 to 2020 as First Deputy Minister and Government Commissioner on Investments, and then from 2018 as a Minister of Finance. During her time in the ministry, she was a co-author of Ukraine's Macroeconomic Revival Program, conducting unprecedented fiscal consolidations, which led to significant deficit and debt reductions for Ukraine. During her tenure, she and her team also created the Ukraine Invest Government Promotion Agency, a Ukrainian startup fund, and an e-data ecosystem of public finance portals, which raised Ukraine's position in all major international data transparency ratings. Prior to her career in public service, Ambassador Markarova spent 17 years working in private equity and financial advisory. She serves on the boards of the Ukraine House DC Foundation in Washington, DC, the Kyiv Mohila Academy, the Ukrainian Development Foundation, and supports Ukrainian Catholic University and the Ukrainian Press Museum Archive. She holds a BS and MS degree from in environmental science from Kyiv Mohila Academy in Ukraine, and an MPA in public finance from Indiana University. We are honored to welcome you, Ambassador Markarova, and I look forward to today's conversation. And I'll pass it off to the World Affairs Council of Miami. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricky. I appreciate that very much. And thank you, Patrick, and to all our other partners. Before I start, I'd like to remind all attendees to share their questions with the Q&A button. We look forward to answering them toward the end of today's session. So, Ambassador, I'm really grateful that you joined us here today, and I think we'll get started zooming out and looking at the big picture. For many Americans, this war, both in its current state since 2022 and in its initial stages since Russia's 2014 invasion and annexation of eastern Ukraine and Crimea, respectively, this may be difficult for people to understand. So we're really grateful to have you with us here today to provide context and insight into this terrible war. My initial opening question would be to ask you how you would help the American public to understand the big picture framing of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Is this primarily a war of territorial ambition, a struggle between democracy and authoritarianism, perhaps an anti-imperial war from the Ukrainian perspective? How do you see that, and how should we understand what's happening between Ukraine and Russia? Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron, and I look forward to our conversation. But before I get to answering the question, Ricky, thank you for your kind introduction, and I'm so glad to see so many people joining us today from Atlanta, Cleveland, Miami, Orange County, and Tennessee, and hopefully much more. It's really, I think, a pivotal time, not only for Ukraine, but also for the US and for so many of us who believe in principles of democracy, human dignity, freedom, democracy, something that we actually cannot imagine our lives without. So answering to your question, it's one of this all of the above type of questions on the one hand, but let me put it a little bit into the context for everyone who listens to us, because we tend to focus on either this horrible two wars or full-fledged war, sometimes talking also about the previous attack. But when we talk about why Russia did it to us twice already, in 2014 and in 2022, we also have to remind that this is actually a normal behavior for the evil empire, whether it's the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, or the Russian Federation. And we have to remind that even during the last 32 years after the breakup of the Soviet Union, Russia already interfered in Moldova and created this military base in Transnistria and created the breakaway district in Transnistria. Russia has attacked Georgia in 2008. Before that, Russia conducted 2 genocidal wars against Chechnya. Yes, a republic inside the Russian Federation, but yet, a horrible, brutal land invasion with all the atrocities. Russian troops have done the atrocities in Syria. It's Russia that is responsible for downing MH17, poisoning people in the streets of London. We can go on and on and on to recite everything that Russian Federation has done, which is no different from actually what Soviet Union kept doing in almost every decade from the Afghanistan war or other wars. So that brings us to question, what is it about? It's definitely not about the territorial conquest, because if you look at the map and you look at Russia and you look at it's the largest land mass in our part of the world, in Europe. It's not like they lack the resources or lack the territory for their people. But it's definitely a fight of autocracy against democracy, because Ukraine was never a threat to Russia. We never posed any threat. We never intended to attack Russia. All Ukrainian people wanted to do is to live in our own country peacefully, but live as Ukrainian, independent, free, European nation that wanted to become member of European Union and NATO, a nation that wanted to elect and change our leaders on a regular basis, because democracy is something that we all believe in. And that in itself was a threat to an autocratic, authoritarian Russia. And that was the only reason to attack us in 2014. And that was the only reason to attack us in 2022. So in a sense, yes, we're fighting for our homes, for our loved ones. We're fighting, we're defending ourselves against this brutal war. But then we're also defending the right of countries, all of us, to make this civilizational choice to be free and democratic and be and have the right to exist. It's also a fight for the international law, because, the United Nations, and I know we might have different assessments of how effective UN is, but United Nations was put in place by all of us, by the globe, after the last large war, after the World War II, specifically because the League of Nations was not able to prevent it. And everyone thought we need a new framework where countries agree to territorial integrity, agree to sovereignty, agree to the right to the rules in which we all operate. And what Russia is doing now, they have challenged these rules, not only for Ukrainians, they have challenged it for all of us. Because if Ukraine can be attacked, then anyone else can be attacked. So it's such a multi-level attack on us as country, and it's existential war for us, but it's an attack on international community. It's an attack on all democracies, and it's an attack on all countries that believe in sovereignty and territorial integrity. And if we want to go back to peaceful lives everywhere and deter not only Russia but other aggressors, we have to win this war. So it's a very horrible war with horrible atrocities, but it's a very consequential war for all of us, for the US, for Ukraine, for Europe, for Japan, for UK, for global South, for everyone. And that's why it's so important to not only talk about it and remind people about it, but also it's so important to win this and not allow Putin and Putin's Russia to win it.
Thank you, Ambassador. I want to touch on the point that you mentioned. When I was in Ukraine in 2018, one of the things that I heard from mostly younger people, when people would ask why is this ongoing fight since 2014 happening, people would say we just want to be a normal European country, right? This is the underlying aspiration before political dialogues about NATO or the EU or anything like that. That's more high level. People just wanted to be a normal European country. So that's something that I always come back to when I think about sometimes the over-analysis of this conflict as well too. But thank you for your context on that. You talked about winning this war, and I want to dive into that a little bit more deeply. Reflecting on these past 2 years, what would you say have been the largest successes in Ukraine's efforts so far to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity? And then conversely, what have been the biggest challenges faced by Ukraine specifically within the context of fighting the war?
Yeah, so it has been a very difficult, full-fledged war. Frankly, something that we haven't seen from World War II, but also with the elements of World War I type of war. When Russia attacked us in the morning of February 24th, 2022, it was a massive ground operation, and also paired with the missiles attacks from north, from east, from south, everywhere in Ukraine. And unfortunately, these massive attacks continue, and they're only subject to availability of missiles in Russia. So almost every day now, we hear about their attacks and destroying, again, civilian residential buildings, hospitals, schools. I mean, it's just a horrible genocidal war that they're conducting. The front line is contrary to what it might seem, because you don't see it on the front page news every day now, but it's a very hot war. So we are holding a very long line from all the way from northeast to south, and it's more than 800 miles long line. So it's a very long line where we are not only defending but also trying to liberate more of our territories. Now, I think what we have done, and the majority of military experts agree with that to date, is nothing short of amazing. If you look at the size of Russia, size of their military, size of their munitions, and size of Ukraine, even with all the help that we are getting, but it's still only Ukrainians who are fighting in this war. We were able to liberate more than 50% of everything Russia occupied since at the beginning of 2 years ago. We have liberated the Black Sea just 6 months ago. The majority of discussions were around the fact that Russia decided to pull out from the grain deal that they negotiated with UN with the help of Turkey, and that again we will have the blocked seaports and will not be able to export grain and other food, which is so not only needed for Ukrainian economy, but so needed by literally hundreds of countries who are buying it for their food security. And now we don't need even to discuss it with Russia. Because of our successful operations with the naval drones and everything else, we were able to create this corridor by ourselves with the help of our friends and allies. So the successes have been enormous. The fact that Ukraine did not fall in 3 days, as a number of people predicted and Russia hoped, is also a great success. Now, did we win the war? No, we still have a war to win. So on the one hand, there is a lot we were able to achieve already, and we can do even more. And I can clearly say this war is winnable. We can win it if we double down now and continue what worked during these 2 years. On the other hand, it's a very horrible war. And as we are discussing with our friends and allies the continuation of support, we are running out of a lot of munitions. And Russia is not stopping their deadly attacks on our civilian cities. They are not stopping their attacks on the front line. And what is even more horrible, they're not stopping the killings and rapes and everything they're doing to Ukrainians on the occupied territories. So look, it's clearly time now to do what worked and to double down and liberate and get to victory as fast as we can. But the situation is very, very difficult. And clearly, like we heard at the Munich Security Conference from our president, but from so many more leaders who were there, that it's a pivotal time. And we have to show that we democracies, regardless of our discussions, regardless of our electoral cycles, regardless of everything that makes us democracies, we also can stay focused and help each other and support each other in this existential fight with autocratic regimes, because Russia is not also fighting alone. They're fighting together with Iran, together with North Korea. Both countries are supplying them with missiles and drones, respectively. They are hugging with Hamas openly in Moscow and helping them. So we have to also, again, remind ourselves what is it about and why we have to win. And it's winnable. This is what actually, it's very difficult. 2 years of full-fledged war has been very difficult. But all Ukrainians are united and motivated to win this. All we need is a little bit more of weapons and support.
Thank you, Ambassador. Speak to that in greater detail, but before we do, something that you touched on, which is the human cost. It's very easy to discuss and focus on the strategic and the theoretical aspects of warfare, but I want to make sure that we also cover the human cost. And so I would ask you if you could share a bit, Ambassador, about how this war has affected across the country or even in Ukrainian communities. And what are these key humanitarian challenges that the Ukrainian people are facing?
So we can clearly call this war a humanitarian catastrophe.
Maybe how can we help in the international?
Aaron, if I may read for, let me just jump in very quickly for Aaron, because I think we're losing connection for him. So I'm going to read his question number 3, so we understand what was the question. It is unfortunate to all the East to get caught up with the strategic and theoretical aspects of this war and to lose sight of human costs. I would therefore ask you, the Ambassador, if you can share with us how has the war affected the daily lives of Ukrainians, whether in the front lines across the country or abroad? What are the key humanitarian challenges that Ukrainian people are facing, and how can the international community help address those challenges?
Thank you. So as I started saying, this war can clearly be called a humanitarian catastrophe. Just think about it. After the Russia attacked and occupied, several Ukrainian cities are completely destroyed. Mariupol, Mariinka, Bakhmut, Avdiivka. If you look at the pictures which are available on the internet of how these beautiful towns and cities looked like before 2022, you would be shocked. All of those, and I traveled to many of them in my previous capacities, all of those were very green, very beautiful, hardworking people who live there, of course, with big industry, but also, beautiful parks and just lovely, European towns and cities. And now if you look at them, the pictures are from the World War I and World War II type of black and white pictures where everything is destroyed, literally. They are not just occupying the cities, they are completely destroying them. As the result of this war, almost 14 million people are internally and externally displaced people. Just think about the number. 14 million Ukrainians were forced to leave their homes. And when I say forced to leave their homes, is literally to take their kids, to take whatever they can carry with them, sometimes not even knowing whether, they will not be shot when they will leave. And like it happened to people who were trying to evacuate from either Irpin or Bucha, when the cars evacuating children who had children written on the cars to stop Russians from shooting at them, and they would still just target these specific cars, like they targeted the theater in Donetsk, where people wrote children, deity, right on the top of that theater, like it was done, unfortunately, in so many of this. We have about 8 million people who are 6 million people who are outside of Ukraine. And we're very grateful to all the friends and allies who actually provided so much hospitality and help to these people. But people want to be home. People want to live with their families, not to be divided. And so to have the 6 million outside, 8 million internally displaced everywhere in Ukraine is the big tragedy. We also have to say that, because the resources are very scarce, everything Ukraine raises and collects as revenues, and we have done a lot to cut down all the expenditures we could and increase the revenues. And our business has done amazing effort of relocating, staying resilient, continuing to produce and provide services and generate some money. But everything Ukraine earns goes to the war effort, goes to the defense effort, to our military. And we rely upon our international partners, so-called budget support, in order to be able to treat our people or teach our children, even in the bomb shelters. And it's again a very one of the first needs now, because all of our kids are behind vaccination schedules. All of our kids have to go to bomb shelters 3-4 times a day sometimes. Not to mention, so it's a direct threat, and we're losing so many people on a daily basis. Literally every morning I am dreading this moment when you wake up and I read the news and you read how many are killed and wounded from attacks on Dnipro, on Kharkiv, on Odessa, on Kherson, on so many other places. Not to mention the psychological trauma, you know, to all the people who are affected by this, because every Ukrainian is affected by this, whether they're on the front lines, they're in Kiev, they have relatives who are on the front lines, those who lived under occupation for 33 days, like in my hometown, or for longer, like in Kherson, or those who still live under occupation now for 2 years under horrible conditions. And I want to separately mention the children and the abduction of Ukrainian children, something that is not only a horrible crime, but also something, the crime for which Putin and his so-called ombudsman Lvova Belova are indicted by the International Criminal Court for the abduction of Ukrainian children, which is part of the genocide. We have right now more than 20,000 officially registered cases, but Russians themselves brag about hundreds of thousands of children who they taken into Russia by force, separated with the parents, or orphans who were under state care. And moreover, they changed their own legislation and put them, these kids, on speedy adoption. How do we know that? Because we were able to already get some of these kids back, hundreds. Very small number compared to those they have stolen. And what this, especially teenagers, are telling us is horrible. How they are abused, beaten, forced to listen and sing the Russian national anthem, forced to recite that they are Russians, not Ukrainians. You know, the psychological and physical, frankly, abuse is enormous. But then think about the babies they have stolen. The teenagers are going through horrible trauma, but at least they remember who they are. How much time and effort it will take us to find all the little babies that are stolen by Russians. So it's just one war crime after another. And Ukraine has filed, you know, we have more than 125,000 individual criminal cases already being investigated by the Ukrainian Prosecutor General. We have additional 16,000 cases on related crimes against the national security, primarily conducted on the territories which are occupied. We have more than 20 countries that also open their own investigations, and we have lawsuits that Ukraine filed in the majority of the international courts, actually all international courts. So you know, it's whatever dimension of this you take, whether justice and war crimes that committed against Ukrainians, or psychological trauma, or healthcare shortages, because again, just imagine how many people, you know, their health is worsened not only by the direct threat, but because they don't have access to medical support that they need, whether they're diabetic or they need you know, constant care, or they have oncological cancer problems. You know, all of that is adding to the huge humanitarian horrible situation. But to finish on a little bit of a positive note, this is also one of the humanitarian catastrophes where we see how Ukrainians are actually helping Ukrainians, how the civil society that is something that differentiates us from Russia is working everywhere, whether they were before working against the domestic abuse, or helping with the AIDS programs, or helping for small business owners to educate them. Now they all are providing food and helping people and providing psychological care and helping each other and taking care of children. So it's also one of the points of a great resilience, where Ukrainians are trying to do everything we can by ourselves. And we really appreciate all the support, and we need the support in order to be able to not only sustain this effort, but become self-sustainable again. We are dreaming about the time when not only just and lasting peace come back to Ukraine, but also when we can get back on our feet, when Ukrainians can come back from, Poland, Germany, US, and other countries where they have to be now because it's not safe, or their houses and their towns are still under occupation. But everyone I talk to here in the US, and we have about 200,000 people who found the new homes temporarily during this horrible war, all of them have one goal only, for us to win and for them to go back home as soon as they can.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I apologize for the technical issues.
That's okay.
I'm really glad that you added in the humanitarian component, because ultimately this war is traumatically impactful on every Ukrainian, both in and out of the country. And so thank you for sharing a bit about that experience. You mentioned, ultimately the need for continued support, and that brings the conversation right back to Washington. In your job as ambassador, you have no doubt been seeing and, of course, been involved in the conversations surrounding this national debate about whether to continue supporting Ukraine. Though I should note this is largely a bipartisan cause. There is bipartisan support for Ukraine. There are, of course, some minority voices who say that America should reconsider that support. I would ask you to articulate why do you argue it's crucial for the United States to continue supporting Ukraine in its defense against Russian aggression? And maybe more specifically, how do you, in your day-to-day working, maybe on Capitol Hill, how do you address the concerns of some in Washington who argue that whether for financial, ideological reasons, that support is not in America's interest? If you could share with that with us, I think it would be very helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely, Aaron. So let me start by saying that I see clearly, before this invasion started and after that, supporting Ukraine and supporting this fight is clearly a very strong bipartisan effort. And I still see that we always had discussions, to be honest, and which is normal. US is a democracy, Ukraine is democracy. There should be healthy discussions about any topic. But we do have the very strong bipartisan support. And just yesterday and day before yesterday, when President Zelensky was in Munich, he not only was there to speak and meet with the leaders, European leaders, but he met with Vice President Harris. He met with both Senate and the House delegations, very strong bipartisan delegations there, with Secretary Blinken. And from both parties, we hear a very strong bipartisan support. Now, of course, we have to address the concerns and describe and try to convince those who, for different reasons, might doubt the support. And I think it's, again, there are different reasons for that, and thus different arguments why actually we have to together state the effort. So some people might not support it on, as you said, ideological basis, thinking that US should just take care about the US and not be involved outside of US at all. And for that, I think, unfortunately, Putin's speeches and Putin's actions and him poisoning even Navalny or whatever, however they killed him, poisoned before and now while having him in prison, gives kind of the best answer to why we all have to be involved. Nobody is an island. And unfortunately, in this very connected, very polarized world, democracies have to defend each other and defend itself. We have to stay together. And America, as a global leader, as the beacon of democracy, as the country to who so many of us look up to, have to lead. Otherwise, if you do not lead, then you let others, and those are not going to be the democracies, to lead in this effort. So here I can only quote, great presidents of this country, and there were so many of them, but especially the one who destroyed the evil empire the first time. But unfortunately, we have to finish that destruction. or the Senator McCain, who has been such a great American, but also a dear friend of Ukraine, who I actually met in Ukraine during the Maidan in 2014, and who has been so vocal on support of Ukraine, who said, you know, that Americans never hide from history. They do not hide from history, they make history. This is the moment when we all have to make history. This is the moment when we have to support the values on which your great country is built: democracy and freedom. In 1775, when there were doubts, as you know, and you can read in the books among many here, whether you actually can fight for your own democracy, whether you can become independent, whether you have enough in this. And then Patrick Henry said, you know, in his very famous speech, "Give me liberty or give me death." It's in you, and it's in us. You know, we want to be free and democratic, and if we want to send a very strong, resounding message to those who believe the world should belong to autocracies and to empires, we have to do it together. Now, there is also argument on transparency and accountability. And as the former Minister of Finance, I cannot agree more that all the support that we're getting from our friends and allies, all taxpayers' money that are spent on this effort should be very transparently spent, and there should be a high degree of accountability. And I can assure, and let's remind our viewers, actually, how transparent and accountable this support has been. So from 4 supplementary budgets, $111 billion that have been provided by Congress to not only Ukraine, but also other friends and allies in connection to this horrible attack, the part that goes to Ukraine, the military support, we're not getting the money, we're getting the goods using several programs, but the money stays here in the US. They're used to either replenish your stocks when you give us something from your stocks, or they're used to create jobs, additional jobs in so many, more than 30 states across the country to produce this. So creating jobs, creating and producing more of American equipment that we put to a very good use in Ukraine. On the budgetary support, and frankly, on the military support, just to add, the equipment that we're getting, we're using the NATO lock-fast system in order to account for every piece of equipment that we have. And you can read the reports of the Inspector General from Pentagon. There are quite a number of them now on how effectively and efficiently we're using and controlling it. On the budget support, you know, it's about $23 billion that you have provided to us, for which we're very grateful. It goes very transparently through the trust fund of the World Bank, through USAID into Ukrainian accounts, and we report literally daily on what are we spending it on, and the World Bank is checking. And we have the audit done by Deloitte. So actually, we can practically see every dollar of your taxpayers' money, what is it spent on. Now, if you look at your security documents and you see that Russia is a threat to all of us, then the amount of money the US has provided us, again, we're very grateful for all of it. And we're very grateful for the support that we're getting, but it's also a very small amount compared to the tasks that we're now fulfilling together on reducing the threat from one of the key adversaries and enemy who is interfering in the US, who is attacking even indirectly US and other allies through this different soft and other attacks and cyber attacks, and you know, threatening all of us who are trying to actually make the world more peaceful place. So whether it's from, you know, the moral perspective and the ideological perspective, it's the right thing to do for any democracy, and it's definitely the right thing to do for US as the leader of democratic countries. Whether it's from transparency perspective and efficiency of using it, whether it's from developing the jobs in Ukraine from, you know, the local perspective, how actually the local communities here also benefit from this increased production, or whether it's from actually returning back to peace. Because again, let's remind all our viewers that the prosperity of the US, the prosperity of Europe, the prosperity of Japan are all built on peace that we were able to achieve in 1945, and a prolonged period of peace when we all cooperated, traded together, and built the wealth for our citizens based on this joint cooperation and trade and everything else. Now, Ukraine can be a solution after we win together to so many of the global challenges in food security, in energy security, in cyber security, in digital solutions. We would be more than happy and able to not only replace those unreliable suppliers who actually are trying to use the trade in order to build their autocratic regimes to attack someone, but in Ukraine, US will have such a good trusted ally in energy and all other areas, a partner with aligned principles and values, not only economic interests. And also our battle-tested army. Let's talk about something that, a benefit that we can offer to all of our friends and allies, which came from a horrible disaster. But our battle-tested, very capable army, the only army that was able to stop Russian army, which was considered the second largest in the world before this horrible mistake they made when they decided to attack us again, is going to be such a great asset to the transatlantic community, to NATO, to everyone else. We would be more than willing to support not only us in the future, but all of our friends and allies from the threats that unfortunately will not disappear even after we win this war. So from all of these perspectives, this is the right thing to do. This is the moral thing to do. This is what, you just have to defend the good. And it's, on the one hand, it's difficult, of course, to reach out to everyone and to convince everyone. But on the other hand, what makes it easier is that we don't need to invent anything to convince people. We just have to tell them the truth. We just have to show them what Russians are doing in Ukraine. We just have to show them what our people are going through, and also show them what we are fighting for. And, truth always liberates people. And we really hope that if we can do more and reach out to everyone and tell people and invite people to come also to see it with their own eyes, whoever is willing to come, that we will be able to reach everyone's heart and mind and have people staying with us in this very difficult fight, and also diverting, one last argument, a moment when Americans will have to fight in this war. Because again, let's listen to Mr. Putin. He's very clear in all his horrible interviews that it's not just about Ukraine, that he's rebuilding whatever he has in mind, whether it's the Soviet Union or Russian Empire, and he threatens on quite a regular basis not only us, but also Baltic states and Poland and Finland and, whoever he is really angry with on that particular day. Now, we don't want the Article 5 of NATO to be tested. We don't want our friends, we don't want Americans to fight on the battlefields. But right now, just by helping us with weapons and money, you can actually help us to stop while it's still in Ukraine, and we can do it.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. That was a very comprehensive overview, and I wish you a lot of luck also on Capitol Hill advancing those same arguments. I think that they're very persuasive and very well reasoned. So thank you for sharing that. We prepared a few other questions, but in the interest of time, I want to get to the audience Q&A because we have quite a few coming in. What we've done is we've compiled them into grouped common questions to consolidate. The first one actually touches on something that you had just mentioned, NATO. So the question a few questions we received is really, what is the status of the Ukrainian membership in NATO? And building from that, will this war push NATO to accept Ukraine as a member state?
Well, first of all, let me remind where we are, even before this war, where we have been with regard to our aspirations to join NATO. The majority of Ukrainians support Ukraine's membership in NATO. It's clear to us that, you know, the ideas of the buffer zones and that you can be between here and there, you know, are no longer valid. You're either part of the family of democratic nations, or you're occupied by Russia or by some other autocratic regimes. And Ukrainians are very clear in who we are and who we want to be, and our return to the European family, joining the European Union and joining NATO has always been, you know, since 2014, not only supported by Ukrainian people, also put into, but, you know, championed by Ukrainian politicians. So in 2018, we made changes into our constitution to reflect it. So it's even reflected in our constitution. And we started a very thorough cooperation with NATO as an alliance and NATO countries. So we received EOP, the partner opportunity with NATO in 2020. And right now, after the Vilnius summit last year, we already have the Ukraine NATO Council. Now, of course, the end goal for us is to be a member of NATO. And we believe that nobody, and especially Russia, should not have a veto on this. And we see how the countries which even believed in neutrality before, like Finland and Sweden, after they have seen again the true face of Russia, which they remember since the last war, they decided to go ahead and join NATO. And I'm so glad that NATO has been also very quick in moving ahead and accepting them. Now, we understand there are challenges. We understand that the country in war was never accepted during the hard period of war into NATO. But, you know, right now we are very focused on working together with the alliance on finding the ways how we can move closer to the membership more effectively, but also we already are working on interoperability with NATO. So if you see, even during the 2 years of war, the Ukrainian military shifted into the NATO standard equipment as we fight on the battlefield. Was never done before by anyone. And we have not only done it in a very effective and efficient way, but we are also showing how some of this NATO equipment can be used in a very effective and efficient way. For example, nobody had approved before that Patriot systems, which we know are excellent systems, can shoot down the supersonic missiles, where they can, with the capable Ukrainians who are operating them on the ground. We are showing how they can protect Ukrainian children and civilians from this deadly attack that Russians are launching on a daily basis. And we can go on and on and on. So yes, for us, I mean, it's very clear. We want to be part of NATO. Of course, NATO as an alliance requires unanimous decision. So it's not only work that I'm doing here in the US, but also work in so many other capitals that all unanimously have to support our membership in NATO. And I think, it's not just about security in Ukraine, because of course we have to address the security as one of the key concerns even after we win this war, in order to rebuild, in order to attract all the businesses to come and invest and participate in this successful rebuilding of Ukraine after we win. But Ukraine also will have a lot to add to NATO, again, as I said, with our battle-tested army, with our experience, with everything else. So I think it will be a very mutual win-win type of situation. But of course, the priority now is to win the war. So we are working in parallel on every reform, all the reforms that we have to do to become closer to NATO, and all the interoperability with NATO. Through the NATO-Ukraine Council, we are discussing a lot of items. As you see, Secretary General of NATO always present at Ukrainian Defense Contact Group. We call it the Ramstein Group, every month, which is co-chaired by Secretary Austin and our Minister of Defense. So we feel through all this interaction with NATO that we're so much closer to NATO now. But of course, the strategic goal is to become the next member of NATO. And I really believe that we will be having a proud 33rd number hopefully soon.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We've grouped together the remainder of the questions to try to efficiently get through them. So we have, if possible, with time permitting, we have 3 grouped questions. The next one concerns U.S. politics, of course, and the news with regard to the House of Representatives. The question is, if the House does not support the Senate authorization, what options does Ukraine have? And then building off of that more broadly, how would a second Trump presidency affect the war? Very small questions, but
I'll try to be very quick on both of them so that we can answer all questions. So on the House, I have to say that I know that the discussions are ongoing. I know from public communication from the speaker, you saw it in his recent statement on Navalny, and also on the discussions that were before that he believes in democracy, he believes in freedom, he believes in the fact he says very clearly that Putin cannot win this. So I don't even, of course, we're working on with all of our friends and allies on what can we do right now when we are still waiting for the package to be voted. But given that we do have a very strong bipartisan support, given that Speaker's heart is in, defending freedom and democracy, I have hope that maybe not as fast as we needed it, because we needed the support yesterday, but I believe that Congress will support us, because the majority of people in Congress understand how vital it is, not only for Ukraine, but also for the US and for everyone. With regard to the politics, as you know, of course, I cannot comment on the internal political issues as an ambassador. So I can only say that we're fighting for democracy, and we believe in the value of democracy. We believe in the value of democracy to the extent that we are ready to die for it. So it's up to American people who they will elect, as in any election. But I believe that, the strategic friendship with Ukraine is not only bipartisan, it's all American. So again, without getting into the local politics, we see the US as the country, as our friend and ally. Our countries are based on the same values and principles. And I know that, whoever American people will support, it will never change our friendship and admiration to the United States.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. The next question category concerns what strategies or efforts is Ukraine taking to secure a lasting peace in the region? Specifically, the question concerns whether the Ukrainian side may consider any territorial compromises in exchange for a ceasefire with Russia.
Well, first of all, let's listen to Mr. Putin and clearly see that there is nothing on there is no peaceful proposals from them, and they're very clear in communicating they continued intent to kill and destroy us and reach all the targets of their so-called military operation, but rightfully called genocidal, aggressive war against Ukraine. Second, if Putin wanted to finish this war, he can do it like this. He can order his troops to stop the war and get out from Ukraine, and that's going to be the end of the war. So let's not get ourselves fooled by the discussions of negotiations that needed in order to reach peace. This is the war of choice of Mr. Putin. We did not provoke it, we did not start it, and we definitely are not intended to go beyond our border as soon as Russians will stop it and get away from our territory. All we will focus on after that is negotiating, of course, the reparations and how they will pay for everything they've done to us, and justice, being served. But we are not barbaric people like Putin's Russia, and we do not intend to continue this war if they will decide to stop. So, and third, on the territory concessions, these concessions will not lead whatever concessions anyone might think about, will never lead to a just and durable peace. They will not lead to peace at all, because it's not part of Ukraine that Putin is after. He's after democratic, free Ukraine, and he wants to destroy and kill all of us. And actually, we have tried that before. In 2015, we have negotiated ceasefire. We have signed Minsk Accords, so-called, which were very unfair to Ukraine. And yet we spent 8 years working on how to implement them to the T, to restore our territorial integrity through the diplomatic negotiations, while Putin used all of the time to accumulate the weapons. He used us on the 24th of February 2022. So I think we just have to be very clear. Nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. We want it so badly, but we also have to be clear that this peace can be achieved only through strength. And without restoring territorial integrity, without returning our people, without doing everything that President Zelensky put in his 10-step peace formula, which we are discussing with more than 80 countries right now, and hopefully there will be more. And it's all based on the UN decisions. Without restoring what Russia has violated with this brutal reinvasion on the 24th of February, we cannot reach peace, not for Ukraine, not for Europe, not for any of us.
Thank you, Ambassador. The last question grouping concerns sort of big picture geopolitics. The first in relation to Russia. The question is, will the current performance or will the performance of the Russian military in the war so far undermine Russia's status as a great power, in your opinion? And then do you think the outcome of this war will be a determining factor in the survival, growth, or decline, depending on the outcome of democracy on a global scale?
Well, I think we can safely stop calling Russia a great power. And really, it's time to decolonize our studies and our thinking and question ourselves whether they ever even were a great power that we all made them to be. Because if you look at, it's definitely a great level of corruption, judging by the poor states their armed forces are, and the lack of motivation and the lack of human dignity and decency. Their only strengths that they think they have is not having any moral boundaries and no red lines, and their willingness to do what we in the normal countries think is unthinkable, kill someone, rape someone, launch a war in the 21st century with rockets, weapons, tanks, and pretending that they didn't do it, first, when everyone could see it on their phones, on the satellites, in online regime, lying constantly. Let's just go back in time a little bit. 2 weeks before they attacked us on February 24th, they have met with pretty much all foreign ministers. They have talked to all the world leaders, and they lied them straightly into the face that they are not going to invade us. 2 days before they attacked us, they were still talking to some global leaders and foreign ministers, and they were lying to them. So what type of great power is that? We just have to realize that it's a very small economy, which actually only exists because some countries still continue to buy energy resources. Some countries still are trying to use the situation without paying attention and isolating Russia properly for what they've done. It's a very small economy. There is nothing they can offer the world except for the raw materials and the corruption and aggression and war crimes that they're exporting everywhere through their Wagner forces, which again, hopefully will soon cease to exist as the force, through their horrible politicians, through their weapons, which are no longer, they have to rely themselves on the North Korean and other weapons. So we just have to see Russia for what it is, and we just have to double down on sanctions and isolation so that we can actually make the defeat of Russia faster. And in a strange way, it's not only Ukraine that needs Russia to be defeated. It's not only the democratic world that needs Russia to be defeated. It's also the normal Russians who needs a defeat of Putin's Russia, aggressive and all of this, to have a chance to build something new, to build a country that they have dreamed. All these Russians who are outside of Russia now, who are ashamed to say that they're Russians. But there could be different Russia. But it's impossible even to start thinking about the different Russia without a defeat of this evil empire that continues to exist on that territory. Again, whether it's called the Soviet Union, Russian Empire, or Russian Federation, they have to acknowledge and own their war crimes. There should be justice served, and then there is a chance for them to actually start the transition to something different.
Thank you, Ambassador. We're just about out of time, but I wanted to share, we received a comment from Eastern Ukraine. It's very heartfelt, and I thought it'd be appropriate to close on this from the audience because the audience cannot see the questions submitted by them. We have a comment coming in from Zaporizhia. It says, "Good day. I am writing to you from Zaporizhia, situated 35 kilometers from the harsh front lines of combat. The cities along the front line have been utterly destroyed. I'm grateful to the armed forces of Ukraine, which prevent the Russians from advancing closer to Zaporizhia. All the people here know that historically our land has been a fortress of defense for the West against forces from the East. It is in our blood, our historical memory. And now we are honorably fulfilling this mission. However, the forces of Russia are incomparably greater than Ukraine's. Therefore, we can only withstand the onslaught with the support of Western partners, particularly the United States. Thus, I seize this opportunity to thank the American people for their assistance in our fight against Russia and to emphasize that if Ukrainians fail to stop Russian authoritarianism, no one in Europe will be able to do." That wasn't the question, but I thought it was something that I wanted to make sure that we vocalize because I think it really collectively summarizes the conversation we're having today and the seriousness of what we're discussing. Ambassador, on behalf of the World Affairs Council of Miami and all of us, our partner councils, thank you, Ricky, thank you, Patrick, thank you all of you on the back end supporting this. We're very grateful for your time and we really appreciate everybody joining here today. Ambassador, I've also told you, and I'm sure the invitation stands for Atlanta, when you'd like to come down to Miami, we look forward to hosting you in person as well too. Thank you very much. I'll hand it over to you if you have any final words. Otherwise, we'll close. I know we're running a little over time.
No, thank you very much. And thank you to my fellow Ukrainian from Zaporizhia. I mean, Zaporizhia has been pounded literally daily, you know, for being so brave and reaching out during this time to all the American friends. Just can echo it. We're very grateful to every American for all the support. And now it's time to stay the course, you know, to continue this and to win together.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you all of you for joining in. Have a good rest of your day, and we hope that you learned something and found it informative. Please stay tuned for further events with the World Affairs Council of Miami and our partners across the network. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. God bless you all.
Thank you.